Well, good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me, or I normally talk loud enough. So, one of the first things that I asked for when I was asked to take over the motorcycle program was when was the last assessment, and I asked to have one when I took the program over. I think we're all relatively intelligent people and can look at things with a fairly good eye, but sometimes there's a big benefit of having outsiders take a peek at your programming and looking at it from a third-party perspective, and so that's what the motorcycle assessment is all about. The NHTSA will send in 4 or 5 people who are all programmatic experts in their fields for the different areas covered by a particular program, and they'll go through all your data and all your programming and all the information that you can throw at them in about 3 days, and they'll come out with this draft report that says, here's what we think. And generally speaking, what you have in these assessment reports is, you're doing this, please stop. You need to start doing this or continue to do what you're doing with this. And so when we had the assessment, we were very fortunate to have had some very good people brought in for that particular task. And fortunately, none of their recommendations were really, you need to stop doing this. Most of them were continue what you're doing, or here's some tweaks that you can have to make your program a little better. So I think it's a very good statement on the program as I inherited it. So we have the assessment, we have the draft report now. We are making some minor technical corrections to it, sending it back to the team for revision. We should have a final report fairly soon. But we wanted to share with you the major points of what they brought to our attention. Many of the things that they mentioned were already in the pipeline being done. And so it's going to be a matter of continuing that and making the tweaks that they suggested. So let's get right to it. So I'm going to walk. I can't stand still, sorry. I can't stand still. The first thing is the assessment offers this tool to review the motorcycle safety program. The information to conduct is collected and given to them. They get a giant binder about 3 or 4 weeks before they come to review, and I think ours was well over 1,000 pages of documents. And then they convene to review and analyze all this information from the interviews and the binder and everything else, and they come out with this report. So these presentations were conducted over 3 days in the early spring. They covered these 7 areas of the motorcycle program. I know some of us are involved in all of them, some of us are involved in only a couple of them, but this is the basic meat of a motorcycle program. So the recommendations that they came out with is, the first one is in program management, which was strengthen the strategic action plan with some more data analysis and assignment of those tasks to individuals or groups. One of the things that they noticed about our strategic action plan was that they had a suggestion to complete something, but then didn't say who was responsible for actually going out and doing it and getting it done, as well as specific dates when that needed to be done. So that was one of the tweaks that they mentioned to us, that we need to say, okay, this needs to be done, this group of people is responsible for it, and we need you to get it done or started by this particular date, rather than just saying this needs to get done. They did like the collaborative efforts that TxDOT, DPS, the Motorcycle Safety Coalition, the rider groups, all those people involved. They liked the fact that we all managed to at least get along and tolerate each other well enough to get some things done. That's not always the case. They did also ask us to develop some evaluation protocols as far as being able to take a hard data look at whether your program areas are working. Are the things that you're putting into place making an actual impact on the overall goal, which is obviously to reduce fatalities and crashes? When it came down to motorcycle protective equipment, sometimes these reports will have to add something into them just because they are always due. In the state of Texas, adding a universal mandatory helmet law. Seek that legislation. Texas doesn't have one, so that's automatically going to go in there without much of a conversation. The next thing was to train law enforcement to recognize non-compliant helmets. Even in the absence of a helmet law, there are still a very small select group of people who are required to wear a helmet, underage, children, things of that nature. The ability for law enforcement to recognize a non-compliant helmet is practically non-existent after they talk to the officers. The officers wouldn't know a DOT from a Snell from a novelty. There is training for that. It's not that big of a deal, but there is training involved, and so that's one of the things that we kind of need to start getting out to law enforcement was, when you stop a motorcycle, there's a 12-year-old on the back that's required to have a helmet. Is that 12-year-old wearing a compliant helmet or not? And then continue to encourage the use of protective gear. And I think this says a lot right here in some of our things, the fact that, number one, we are already encouraging the use of protective gear. And it's not just a helmet conversation. It's boots, it's chaps, it's leather coats, it's textile coats, it's gloves, it's eye protection, it's all of these other things. A lot of times when I speak to the bike groups and remind them of just how much protective gear they actually do wear absent the helmet, there's a lot of protective gear being worn. But encouraging the use of all of it, it's not about just wearing a helmet. It's about all of the other protections that come with it. And so the fact that we were already doing this, they noticed that and asked us to continue, I think speaks well for the program as I inherited it. Operator licensing was a little bit bigger of a deal, simply because the licensing and the training, while in the same agency, are two functions of separate entities within that agency. So one of the things, of course, is integrate and update the motorcycle operator manual, increasing the fine and penalty for operating without that M-Class license, they thought was a little weak. Update the system so that rider education courses can be uploaded directly into the driver history. And this was something I wasn't aware of when I got here. When you go through the motorcycle rider education course, whether it's a BRC, an ERC, doesn't matter, that form that they give you to take to the BMV or to the DPS to show that you've went through this course is scanned and uploaded as a PDF to your driver history. It is not searchable. It is not part of your driver history as anything other than attachment. John Young's system at the DPS would allow him to upload those directly to the driver histories as a data field. And so you wouldn't even need to take your form into the driver's license branch to get your license. It would pull right up on there. It would save the printing of all the printing costs. It would save the time and effort to know if it was a valid card or not. It would save all the time and effort of them having to scan it and save it as a PDF. So that was one of their big suggestions, was give John Young the ability to just simply approve those and upload them to the system, and then they're there. There's no question about whether or not it was an actually approved course, whether it was expired or not, anything like that. It's just right there. It also allows us to search to say how many people who went through training last year actually went and got their license. Because as a PDF, you can't search any of that. If it's uploaded as a data field, you can search that. And that would give us some answers as to how many of the 45,000 so a year we're actually training are actually going and getting their M-Class license. So that was a big one, and John and I are already talking about trying to make that happen. A couple of other things that were kind of surprised me a little bit. Number one, eliminate the skills test for applicants under 18. And the reason for that is if they're under 18 and they don't have an endorsement, they're required to go through the BRC. If they've been through the BRC, why do they have to come back and do it again at the license branch? Eliminate the eye restriction and study on an expiration date for the MSB-8. Apparently there's no expiration date on that MSB-8. If you took the BRC 30 years ago and still have the card and you walk into the DPS today, they will still give you an M-Class license on that training course. So that was something that they suggested. Rider education and training. A couple of these are pretty self-explanatory. Establish a formal curriculum review and approval process. Expand the rider coach prep to more locations and time. One of the things that being a new Texan, I'm constantly surprised at just how big this place is. Most of you know I'm from Indiana, where you can drive all the way across the state in 3 hours. North to south, 5. When one of the first trips I took, they asked me if I wanted to drive or fly. And I was like, excuse me, I'm just going down the road to so-and-so. Yeah, that's 7 hours. Oh, okay. Really? Are you sure? Yeah, we're sure. Okay. Making rider coach preps more available, because obviously having enough rider coaches is an issue, and not just for Texas, it's an issue everywhere. Waive the driver's licensing division knowledge test for the BRC graduates. When they go back in with their MSB-8, they still have to sit down and take the knowledge test. If they've been through the BRC, all you're doing is recovering it. It removes a step from the process. It's really kind of duplicative. So that was their suggestion. And then provide the capital improvements for providers, including the fleet and range, which John is doing on a basis as he can now. They suggested we do more with that. Alcohol and other drugs. Create a motorcycle safety campaign focused on impaired riding. Most of our motorcycle safety efforts have been about share the road, look twice for motorcycles, and things of that nature. What they noticed was that we really didn't have a campaign that strictly focused on telling riders that it's bad to drink and drive, or drink and ride, or get on the back of a bike with someone who's been drinking. And so they suggest that we created that. And we have a lot of ideas with our ad agency that does our Look Twice and our Share the Road campaign. And some stuff in-house with the Motorcycle Safety Coalition to try to come up with not only an individual campaign to focus on impaired riding, but a way to integrate it into the alcohol programs that happen all summer long. So that it's not just drunk driving, it's drunk driving, drunk riding, motorcycles, cars, it doesn't matter. Identify areas where the DUI crashes are occurring and conduct law enforcement operations in those areas. That is basically doing a crash analysis. And we do this with cars all the time. Where are the DUI crashes happening? When you put them on a map, you'll see the clusters. They're all happening in a certain area. That's when you tell your STEP agencies and your law enforcement agencies you need to go do enforcement in this particular area. Encourage and recognize motorcycle groups and clubs who self-police and have a culture of zero tolerance for drinking and riding. Several of the club members that spoke to this committee not only mentioned that they had a requirement to even be a member of their club was to have an endorsement. Their rides are alcohol-free. Once you get there and you're not riding anymore that night, you drink as much as you want. But while we're riding, we're sober. And so one of their suggestions was to recognize those clubs that are doing that and hold them up. Legislative, I can't really speak about this a lot. This is not my department. I'm not allowed to lobby. But encourage reinstatement of the universal mandatory helmet law. And then this big one here. Are we all clear at this point that TxDOT does not have the Motorcycle Safety Education Fund under our control? Have we cleared that up finally?
Only the politicians do.
Thank you, okay, because from what I understand, there was some confusion about that in the years prior to me getting here, and I'm pretty sure we covered that. Their suggestion was, however, that fund is growing quite large. We need to seek guidance regarding that status and what they plan to do with it, if anything, and try to at least get some of that to be able to use toward the safety programs, not only with TxDOT, but with DPS. Law enforcement, the first thing they asked was to add motorcycle elements to our STEP grants. Now, our STEP grants normally cover seat belts, speeding, intersections, and drunk driving. One of the things that they asked is, can you put something that the law enforcement agencies could report back to us that we stopped X number of motorcycles during this particular month, and we wrote this number of M license violations during this month. Not telling them that they need to target motorcycles, but we need to start tracking what they're doing with them. We wouldn't know how many motorcycles got stopped or how many were issued citations or how many were involved until they start reporting those to us. And since we have very large grants with law enforcement agencies, that might be some important data to capture, if nothing else, to find out what's being done at this point to see how we go forward with that. Incorporate motorcycle-specific messages into the current enforcement activities and campaigns, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier about with the drunk driving campaigns that happen in August. Instead of it just being a couple of cars, throw a motorcycle in there to remind people on motorcycles that this applies to you too. It's 0.08 for you on the bike as well as in the car. And then conduct operations in high crash locations, which is fairly standard for any kind of programming involving law enforcement. You're going to go where the crashes happen. Engineering. This seemed to have been a bigger area, but there are two big ones for this. Was develop an awareness presentation or training for local and state highway traffic safety engineers to make them aware of roadway conditions that impair motorcycle operation. One of the things that they heard about was grooved pavement, rain grooves, chip and seal, those kind of things, tar snakes. My entire ride to work every morning is nothing but tar snakes. It's one of those things where if an engineer doesn't necessarily ride, they may not think about that too much, because in a car, those things aren't any problem, but on a bike, they can be. So one of the things they asked us to do was kind of come up with a training program to let the engineers that are doing that work on the roadway know, you may not think about it, but this may be an issue, and this is something you need to start taking into consideration. The other thing was encouraging the use of motorcycle-specific warning signs in those areas where there's chip and seal, where there's rain grooves, where there's bumps in the road. A lot of the roads out in West Texas because of the oil boom, the large trucks, there's a lot of ruts. Those roads are in poor repair just because they were never designed to have those kind of weights on them. Maybe issues and problematic for motorcycles. And a warning sign letting a motorcyclist know, hey, you're getting ready to encounter some rough pavement. For the riders in the room, we've all come upon that groove pavement that we had no idea was getting ready to come up, and yeah, it'll slow you down for a second. Our motorist awareness campaigns and communications, conduct an analysis to determine where these multi-vehicle collisions are happening. And that is for the look twice and the share the road. Because if you're going to an area where there's nothing but single vehicle motorcycle crashes, that's not a share the road issue or a watch twice for motorcycles. So what we need to do is a little bit more comprehensive data analysis to say where are these crashes happening where there are right-of-way violations involving a vehicle, conduct our activities there as far as share the road and look twice to make sure that we're getting to the places that we need to be. Evaluate the awareness and impact of our media campaigns. We do some of that anyway, so we need to continue that. Further develop the Motorcycle Safety Coalition database to allow greater distribution of our materials and recruit volunteers. This is where joining the coalition and providing your email address, your Facebook page, if we can get that list to just continually grow when we do have material to put out, like the new posters or the new cards or all this other stuff, those are places where we can send it out to everybody on that list and go, hey, we have this stuff available, post it to your Facebook page. If you need some, let us know. But it allows for us to be able to distribute out a very large amount of material in a very short amount of time. Develop Texas-specific materials for impaired riding licensing and rider training. It's really easy to just take NHTSA's brochure or whatever and simply slap Texas on it and call it a day. But they've asked us to develop things that are specific to Texas because, as I'm coming to find out, we do things differently here just because we can. So basically, all in all, with the recommendations, I was very happy with the recommendations. There were none of the glaring, please stop doing this immediately, you're really messing up. No recommendations like that were in that draft report. Most recommendations were to continue or to increase what we're doing, which tells me that we were at least on the right track. We just needed to kind of step it up a little bit. And then one of my favorite things, more research to better understand what we're dealing with. I've always said in programmatic, you've got to know where the problem is. You have to know what the problem is before you can do anything to do anything about it. I've really often compared it to shooting a shotgun in the dark, blindfolded at a moving target. You throw everything you've got out there and hope to God you hit something. When you have the research and the data, you take the blindfold off, you take a sniper rifle instead of a shotgun, and you turn the lights on and the target stops moving. It allows you to go in, put your programming right where you need it to be, and it becomes effective. And end result is you see your numbers start to come down because you're doing the right thing. One of the things about our numbers is they are going up, but they're going up because 1,000 to 1,100 people a day are moving here. So one of the things I'm doing for the highway safety plan right now is not only comparing the raw numbers of fatals and crashes and all those, I'm comparing the rates. Are our rates going up or down? Because there are several instances where our rates are actually going down while the raw numbers are going up. So that's where the research and data analysis portion comes into this to really tell us where we need to be, what we need to be doing, and then we will start seeing those successes. So we're gonna see more research. Trust me, I'm a big believer in data-driven stuff. Here's my contact information for all of you who thought I was still in Fort Worth. I'm not. I'm now in Austin. Here's my phone number. My email address has not changed. Please contact me with any questions, any issues. If you need materials, I'm always available to everybody. I always answer the phone. At 10, 11 o'clock at night, I'll still reply to an email. So if you need something, let me know. But there it is. I'll leave it up, and I guess you get to listen to Ken next, right? Maybe, theoretically.